I want to be the kind of leader that the closer you get to me, the more you respect me, not the less.
Yeah, man.
And
Mm,
and I've always wanted to be connected to ministries where what we were doing behind closed doors was as kingdomy as what we were doing on stages,
yeah,
right? Like I don't want to present one thing in front of an audience and then go have a
yeah,
vituperative and opportunistic and greedy back office.
yeah,
I'm not built for incongruence like
yeah,
that. Um, and so I don't think I answered your question very well, except just to say, like, man, I would just tap into, you don't have to be a great songwriter
mm,
to write one little chorus thanking God for the unique things that he's done in your place. It wouldn't hurt if you worked on some of the skills of songwriting, but it's not necessary.
yeah,
It it becomes more important if you're trying to put out your songs and have a bunch of other churches sing them.
yeah,
It becomes important if you're singing five of your church's original songs in a row.
yeah.
Now the diet, if the diet is all original, then
Mm.
that repertoire of songs that you've written better be pretty well balanced nutrients.
Well, guys, excited to welcome to the podcast today, Aaron Keys. Aaron, thank you for just spending some time here, man. Yeah,
Let's do
Aaron.
it.
Yeah, I love it. Aaron is you're just very dear to my heart. Obviously, went through 10K fam or 10,000 fathers at the time, and just man, you were super spiritually just forming in my life as not just as a worship leader, as a worship pastor, but man, just as a person. And I still look
Mhm.
back at some of those moments and conversations and all the coaching, and just super grateful, man. So super honored to be able to spend some time with you this afternoon.
Well, me too. Thanks for
Yeah,
asking. And I'm excited to see what you're up to.
yeah,
I love one of the best things about getting to lead the school for 15 years.
mm,
Well, actually, the best thing was the relationships that now we have with really fascinating leaders all over the world,
mm,
and any chance to reconnect and to celebrate
mm,
where those leaders are taking things even further and doing them differently and living it out. That's really meaningful after so many years
mm.
of traveling, playing music, not really meeting a lot of the people. I mean, if I'm in front of 1,000 people, I'm not really going very deep with any of them.
Man.
And so it was so fun to go deep with a few people for 15 years. And now I feel like there's very few cities in the world that we might go to where there's not someone that we would love to go get a drink with.
That's awesome. I love it.
So
No,
it's
I
cool.
love it, Aaron.
Fun to be here.
Yeah, man. Thank you again. And I'd love for you to just give people kind of a peer into the window of your story. I mean, obviously I know a lot of your stories just shared through the worship school, but man, I'd just love for you to give the listeners like, hey, who is Aaron Keys? What you're up to nowadays too, and just give them a peer into your life if you're willing.
Okay, man. Well, here's a quick version. I'm 45 years old, been married 24 years. We have four sons. One just graduated from the University of Georgia. We have a senior at Auburn, two in high school. My wife is a therapist. She's like a marriage and family kind of counselor here in Colorado Springs. We've lived here for the last 4 years. I did worship ministry for 25 years full time. I traveled for most of that, put out a lot of records, wrote a lot of songs, had publishing, record deals, labels, blah, blah, blah. The thing that was most life giving through all of it was getting to hang out with other leaders and especially host people in our home. So,
Mm,
because I traveled so much, I would meet people. I was a worship pastor in Atlanta at a church called Grace Fellowship for 20 years, and we planted churches like Grace Midtown and others where house fires and stuff like that came out of, which was really cool. So I've been surrounded by some really fascinating, entrepreneurial, I guess the Christian word for that is apostolic, people who went and launched really pretty powerful and impactful things. And so getting to celebrate and be around all that was a special season. My wife and I did have a big burden to try to raise up worshipers. Everywhere I'd go, pastors would be like, "Do you know anyone who could be a worship pastor for us?"
man.
And after getting asked that question a lot of times, I was like, "I'm going to figure something out." So we bought a house where we could have people live with us indefinitely. We had four guys live with us, usually between 6 and 12 months at a time, and we just tried to, do discipleship or like actually empower these guys to be at the level where we could go be hired by these churches that needed someone. So we did that for years. It grew beyond our capacity to house everyone. We switched to the model to be cohort and intensive based instead of residency. Sorry, I'm going kind of fast here.
Oh, you're good.
And you know all of this, so I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details. We led the school for 15 years. It became accredited as like a master's level thing with a couple different seminaries. About 40 or 50 of us from the community did go get our master's degrees through that partnership, which was cool. And we trained over those 15 years, I think 500 or 600 worship leaders from around the world. We launched a version of the school in Europe for a couple years. We launched an online version. We would even go into play, like if one worship leader came through our school and wanted to, they were a part of a big team with 10 worship leaders, we would basically design versions of worship school for those 10 worship leaders where we go to them. So that's what we did for the Village Church in Dallas.
Mm.
We did it for a couple different churches like Fellowship Bible in Little Rock. And anyway, it was really fun getting to do this thing in community. And we were surrounded by some amazing families that all joined up with a vision, and we got to run with it together. It got really hard when my travel started decreasing. I was pretty burnt out after it was full-time at church. I was also leading the school. I was also writing and recording. And I was also traveling. And we were like homeschooling our kids for a while. So I kind of got to a point where like I needed to change some stuff, dialed back on the travel. That affected kind of how many people were becoming aware of what we did. We never had like a number one song. We didn't have a good father. We didn't have a tipping point. And so it kind of depended on a very small gravitational pull to bring people into what we were doing. I wasn't able to keep generating that gravitational field. And it was a couple hard years in Atlanta where we were trying to figure out how do we keep doing this without going into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity to move the school to Colorado to join up with New Life Church out here. That all started about 5 years ago. We moved 4 years ago. So we've lived here. We moved here for the sake of our school, and it was a total delight. The last couple years, we had some big leadership challenges in the school, transitions, some people that weren't really, they didn't really ascribe to Megan's and my values and things like that. And so we have transitioned completely out of 10K fam now. We're completely extricated from it, and they are now running that completely separately. Heartbreaking season,
Yeah.
but we are really hopeful for getting back to what we love. We love hosting
Yeah.
freedom. We love hosting people. We love walking with people. That's why what I'm getting to do now as a coach feels maybe I like it better.
Yeah.
Like when you run a big organization with $750,000 in budget, it's complicated,
Yeah.
and
Jeez.
there's a lot to manage. I am not a good manager. I am a terrible manager. I am not an organizational leader. I didn't get into it for any of that. I love walking with people and seeing them experience
Yeah.
unprecedented results. And so, over the last year, I've been trained as an executive coach with this firm called Novus Global, who I've joined. They are an amazing community, a lot of actually ministry background men and women who similar stories of we love helping people. It's getting harder and harder in this particular expression of it for whatever they were in. And so I feel like Megan and I are getting back, or we are back at what we love doing in a configuration that fits really well with probably how we're wired.
Yeah.
And so we still have people in our home all the time. I still coach leaders all the time. And I'm on a team of people I really respect and can learn a lot from. So I now coach, I coach like a filmmaker. I coach these department heads for these engineering companies. I coach like I'm going to start coaching a CFO in the next
That's
couple
awesome.
weeks for a company in LA. Like, and I still coach a lot of worship leaders too.
Yeah.
So it's so fun for me to play in some of these different industries where actually I can't be the guru. I'm not the sage on the stage. In the worship space, it's easy for me to like, well, let me just tell you how to do that. I did it already. If when I'm coaching a CFO, coaching is so different than consulting. I think what I called coaching for so long was really consulting.
Mhm.
Now I'm like, oh, when I'm just giving them all the expertise and answers, that's more consulting. Now I'm doing a lot more just holding space for people. I'm coming a lot more open-ended, curious, asking questions, and I'll disturb and I'll give insight, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not rolling in with 25 years experience in finance as I coach the CFO, right? And so I love a learning curve. I love dynamic communities of people working together. And ultimately, I just love helping people discover and experience new things that will change their lives.
Yeah,
So
man.
that's what I get to do now, and it's a delight.
Hi, my friend. We'll be right back to the episode in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second to tell you about a free resource available to you at influentialworship.com. I've put together a free guide. It's a PDF you can download that'll walk you through 6 practices you can implement this week to help you gain a greater sense of confidence in your calling as a worship leader. So head over to influentialworship.com, download your guide, and let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, Aaron, I'd love to dive into a little bit later, the opportunities that you do get to lead worship now, just how some of that is that shift is, I'd love to hear like how that's shaped how you view the people in your congregation. Because I mean,
Yeah.
oftentimes I think something that can happen is as worship leaders, we maybe lose touch with the reality of people's real lives, like the fact that they do work
Yeah.
these 9 to 5s and we lose touch of that. So I'd love to touch on that. But I just want to say this, like that season that you and Megan opened up your home. I mean, that was like one of the most forming things for me. And I confession time here. I don't think I ever shared this with you, but I remember when I first found out about 10,000 Fathers and even like the Northern Seminary, I was actually excited about the Northern Seminary part. I actually wasn't so excited about 10,000 Fathers, not for the reasons of just, I was going like, man, do I really need like another, program thing? I just want to get the piece of paper, and anyway, man, I look back now and I'm like, you know what? Like it was one of the most, like I would do it 10,000 times over, if it was just for that, especially the hospitality piece of like walking into your guys'
Yeah.
homes and just being like, holy cow, like this is what this is about. And then bringing that back. Like we actually had a major win. Like we host we've just finished up for the summer season now where we'll do this a little more sporadically, but for a weekly, gathering on Monday nights, like we opened up our home to a bunch of people, even bought like a long table, just going like,
Yeah.
again, and that was instilled from you guys, just modeling that for us, right? So just bought this long table that we ended up just sharing a meal together and like talking about life and the scriptures and just pouring over. And we had one of the coolest compliments, like somebody just shared with us. They're like, man, like you guys have created a space. Like, thank you for hosting us in your home and just creating a
Mhm.
space where we could process this stuff and actually build relationship with one another. So I just want to thank you guys because that was instilled
Wow.
and modeled from you guys. So I want you to know it's not in
Mhm.
vain, if that makes sense. Like I know that's the
Amen.
countless tale of other leaders as well. So just really bless you and Megan for that, man.
Well, yeah, I wish Megan could hear that because she's the hospitality
Mm,
guru. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I think I've told this story before, but when we had the guys live with us, for instance, I would always book
mm.
an exit interview and be like, what was most impactful? What was least? What didn't really matter? Because we always wanted to make things better. Still in my life, I'm like, how can we make this better? I always want to make things better. And so I would have expected people to have thought my Bible teaching or talking songs with Tomlin or whatever else, Pat Barrett. But what everyone always said was just being in your home. And that's the kind of stuff that I wouldn't have
Mm,
defaulted to. That is Megan's default.
mm,
And she has such a grace for creating space for people to come and feel safe, and like courageous enough to be vulnerable. I
yeah.
mean, our home has been the first time a lot of people have said a lot of things
Mm,
to any other human.
yep.
And the healing that comes
Yeah.
when you let the light in and
Yeah.
you let someone else in, and that's huge. And then the transformation that becomes possible when it's not a one-off, but
Yeah.
it's connected to an intentional process that's open-ended enough
Yeah.
to be malleable to the individual's needs, but also established enough to be strategic and not ad hoc. Like
Yeah.
that, I think, is what was so powerful. And again, yeah, that's what we still ascribe to and strive to do. It just looks a little different now.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's funny. I remember the first night. I think it was the first night of our first intensive. We did a
Mhm.
SWOT, with you. You guys led us through that, the
Mhm.
strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and I remember I was like, why am I sharing this right now? I don't know any of these people. And then why are they sharing what they're sharing? But even again, just that testimony of like, if you create a safe space, man, and then obviously allow the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit to come and work, like it is powerful. So
Well, I'd
yeah.
love to hear, not to turn the tables here, but what was one of the things that was most transformative about the experience for you? Because these days, anytime anyone's like, "Hey, that was really powerful," in the
Yeah.
past, I'd be like, "Oh, thanks, praise God." Now I'm like, what exactly was that? What? Tell me why. Can you tell
Yeah.
me why?
Man, I think, and actually, honestly, I think it does go back to even just what I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit here is just that, like, how do
Yeah,
we not lose touch with people's real lives? I think you guys got in
yeah,
touch with like, our the real lives and what was going on behind the scenes in ministry because you guys had lived it, if that makes sense. So I think you right away were able to just like break down that barrier of like, hey, we've been in your shoes, like remove the masks and like let's dive into the real stuff. I mean, I felt safe walking into that. I think again, obviously it
yeah.
goes back to that hospitality, but also again, I think you guys hadn't lost touch with like,
Mm,
hey, these are the things that these people are walking through. The you're in touch with like the fears that we all have, worship leaders specifically,
mhm.
like stepping onto a stage can be a vulnerable place. And then you're like, man, am I good enough? You're asking all these questions,
Yeah.
maybe there's insecurities, all these different things. So I think, yeah, I think that was probably it. Like you guys just were in touch with that stuff and then
Mhm.
just said, hey, but let's take down those mosques and walls and let's like enter into that and bring you along, like disciple you along in
Mhm.
how to hold value in terms of your identity to the right things and not like just find your
Yeah.
identity in what you're doing on the stage. Let's go
Um,
deeper than that. Yeah,
yeah.
man.
Yeah. That's a big deal. Well, thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah,
It's fun to hear that stuff.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, I'd love to, yeah, I'd love to. I wanted to get in. I mean, we're talking about like I wanted to get into some song choice stuff of just how the songs we sing do form our people. But I'd love to dive into what just what you touched on there of like, hey, your journey now. Okay, you're not on staff at a church anymore. Like, how has that helped? Get in touch with the times that you do lead, whether it's worship through song or just leading in the church, just in general. Like, how has that helped you? And what could worship leaders learn from that? Of like, hey, how do we not lose touch with the real lives of our people that we're seeking to shepherd, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that I've been fascinated by this occurrence as the last 18 months is the least I've ever led worship.
Mm.
So I've still traveled, I've led some, I've led in Europe a couple times, I've done some stuff in the US. I'm leading next week for something. I still love when I get to do it, but I do approach it from a different trajectory. And I haven't really even come up with language to figure out how to do this really memorably. But I think for so long, I mean, 25 years, I was maybe think about it like I was at the center of that world. I was at the center of that circle. So worship, pastoral ministry, church leadership, where that's what I spent 99% of my time doing and thinking about. How do we do this better? Um, 18 months ago, I asked my church, like, hey, just take me off the schedule for a little bit. I just want to go to church.
Yeah.
Um, it'd be really fun just to like go to church with my
Mm.
family. Or, I mean, some Sundays, just go to brunch with my family. Don't tell anyone. So never in my adult life was that an option.
Yeah.
And um, so I've also worked as a mortgage banker the last 4 years. So I work in an office around people who none of us are on staff at a church. So, but a lot of us go to church together. And instead of coming at a Sunday service now from the center of the circle, I'm coming more kind of on the edge of, I mean, I'm still a part of this thing, but I'm not at the center. This isn't what I was thinking about. I didn't read 2 books about this week. I read about finance or marketing or how to be a better coach. I'm reading a lot of that stuff these days. And so my headspace is just very different. And I used to think like because I lived at the center of that mentality of a worship leader that if someone's not like really ardently going after it on Sunday, they're probably not that into it. They really should be fully expressive all the time. And I had some wild expectations, I think, now of what people's mentalities were
Mm.
showing up for church. And I have been disabused of those illusions in the last 18 months, where now I go to church and sometimes like I love the high competency of New Life. Like the sound is amazing, the band is awesome, the singers are good, the songs are good. Sometimes honestly, I just love kind of listening.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even sing. I'm just like, this is awesome, you know? Uh, and a lot of times I don't feel the need to just go crazy and to throw my body into it. I'm enjoying it and experiencing the prayer and the fellowship with God and with the saints differently than I would have thought was possible 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm enjoying it all the same. And so again, this is clunky communication, and I hate that. This isn't very elegant. But
That's good.
when I lead now, I lead with a higher sensitivity to people's reality not being dominated by ecclesiology.
Yeah.
I think I'm just cognizant of the normal life, reality, parenting, jobs, financial stress, medical stuff, uncertainty. I'm a lot more cognizant of, and maybe now I'm just projecting the same way that I was back then, you know, so I don't want to do that. But I'm much more sensitive to the person. I want to lead the back row now instead
Mm.
of just the front row. Um, I really care about the people whose arms are crossed, not just the people whose arms are raised.
Yeah.
I'm much more interested in. I feel like sometimes worship leading can be kind of like cheerleading, kind of, you know, trying to get everyone pumped up and stoked and hyped. And even a lot of exhortations can be like, "Come on, church, sing out," and on. There's nothing wrong with all that.
Yeah. The pep rally,
But
right?
if that's if that's all that there is, I was just thinking, like, how many times have I not really been showing up like on fire? And I'm there, I'm open, but I'm not like at a level 10 today.
Mm.
When I'm just kind of in neutral, um, how many times has that kind of cheerleady admonition moved me in a direction of engagement? And I actually was thinking about, I'm like, Lord knows, I've done plenty of those exhortations.
Mm.
I was trying to think, I don't think it ever has. I
Yeah.
think what has moved me from like neutral to more kind of engaged is is a thoughtful, insightful, invitational,
Yeah.
personable leader who's welcoming and calling me in instead of someone who's shouting at me and trying to call me up.
Yeah.
Someone who's just like gives me an actual thought that draws my heart or my mind and then my heart, that kind of stuff. So I'm a lot less hypey now.
Yeah.
I was never like too hypey, but I mean, you get in front of a couple thousand people, the energy just goes up, and all of a sudden, like, your prayer gets more intense, and what you're saying becomes more pronounced, and everything kind of cranks up a little bit.
Yeah.
I lead from a much more cranked down place now.
Mm.
It's wonderfully downbeat a
Yeah.
lot of times.
Yep.
And so I'm leading for this record label next week, and I'm excited about not feeling like it has to be intense. It was actually funny. I played this. I don't do a lot of concerts, but I did a concert in South Carolina a couple weeks ago, and that's what they wanted it to be. No lyrics. We just want to hear your songs. So Austin, my guitar player, he's from Austin. We played 17 of my songs back to back to back to back. Um, I was so like, how is this gonna go? Because I'm so used to the songs are basically utilities to get a
Mm.
desired effect of intensity, emotional,
Mm.
you know, heightenedness. Um, Try to like you squeeze every drip out of a bridge to
Yeah.
try to get people to really crank it up, you know, and This was so funny because it was on a farm under a beautiful oak tree. Hundreds of people came and set up their lawn chairs, and
Mm,
I just said, "This is not intense.
mm,
You do not have to sing. You're welcome to sing, but if you want to just like sit and enjoy." And it was actually really fun to pick songs with that as the goal
mm,
instead of like I picked different songs. Like what songs are just interesting to listen to and beautiful intrinsically, not instrumentally, because a lot of times I just pick songs instrumentally. Like this song will do that thing, and that's what we need there. And this is like, no, how do we just have a night of hopefully beautiful music together? And we're in this beautiful place. It was a beautiful early summer night, and I couldn't believe how delightful it was. It was so
mm.
fun, and it was also fun to revisit some songs that I haven't probably sung in over 10 years,
Yeah,
but
dang.
I think are still beautiful. They still hold up, you know? So I do lead from a different perspective now.
Yeah, man.
Less intensity,
Yeah,
more honesty.
yeah. I love what you said about like leading the guy in the back row. Because I mean, I think there can be that. I know I'm guilty of it. Like I hope I'm not speaking at people here. I'm speaking with, with people. Like we all do these things.
Mhm.
But I know, man, when we just lose touch of the reality of real people's lives, I know we can ask questions. Like I've asked questions like, man, like, why are people not engaged? Why are they not singing? Why are they not raising their hands and just being all in? And I love what you said about just like that idea of like, hey, do we acknowledge the person in the back row that maybe has just walked in and like maybe they just found out a death in the family, or their kids were fighting this morning as they drove into church. And I mean, I know I've had those moments where I'm like gotten to just go to church with my wife and I see like, oh, this is what happens, like really happens in the morning, and just important not to
Yeah.
lose touch of that and just acknowledge like, man, how do we shepherd these people, bring them in rather than like shouting at them, or just sort of beating them into submission, if you will, with those comments like, come on, like
Uh,
sing to the Lord. I mean, just that intensity that's like sometimes unwarranted, if you will. So yeah, it's so good.
yeah, the intensity for sure. I think also kind of the artistic competency or mastery. This is something I've been thinking about because obviously not everyone like loves the same genre of music. That's why we have a million different Spotify radio stations or whatever.
Mm,
But even take music preference aside, someone even I mean, there are people that come to church that they don't go to concerts, they don't listen to the radio, they listen to podcasts or audiobooks,
yeah.
they go to conferences, like this isn't their thing. Even for those people who they would describe themselves as I'm not really that into music,
Mm,
they live in 2024 America. And if you watch a film and the score was composed by Hans Zimmer
yeah.
or John Williams, your ear has been trained and calibrated to mastery.
Mm,
If you watch Formula One, Rolex is playing commercials of this, they've got Tchaikovsky, like your ear, even if you don't pay attention, don't even notice it,
mm,
your brain is registering it. And so we live in a culture that acclimates us to music at a very particular level,
mm,
and that is being composed and sort of chosen for very particular reasons. So coming into church when the music is at a pronouncedly lower level of quality on composition,
mm,
execution, performance, there is a hurdle. Ain't nothing spiritual about any of this. This is just cultural, this is neurological, this is physiological. There's hurdles that people got to jump over
mm,
to engage sometimes in worship music. Um, I'm fascinated by that. That's new.
yeah.
A lot of the songs that have stood test of a couple centuries, there was a musical mastery
Mm,
baked in. Now I almost wonder if some songs are being built more like iPhones. Like this thing's going to get 1,500 charges, and then the battery is done. It's kind of built to be replaced.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to see what songs are we still singing in 20 years.
Yeah, man.
And I don't have a judgment about songs that we won't be singing. I think we need fresh stuff that can sit in your fridge for a couple days. And then we need stuff that, potatoes can probably sit in your pantry for like 6 months. I don't know. Don't do that. Don't get sick on my account. But like, I think we need a healthy diet of a lot of different things. I'm so observant these days and curious as I'm seeing things from a different seat.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing things I never thought.
Yeah. Man, that's good. That's good.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good. It's just something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it wanted the idea of like the song diet. I actually did want to get into that a little bit. And I know, like, just going through the Northern Seminary stuff, like this book was foundational, the worship diet piece. But then obviously I've heard you talk about like doing the song audit too, and just going like, man, do we actually take time to pause and just look at like what's the nutrition in a sense that we're feeding our people, right? Or putting before God's people. And is it like anemic or is it rich? I mean, is it diverse? All those different things. And I know this is something we're going down in our context of just looking at like, man, what is our process for actually like vetting songs that we're putting before the congregation? Like, are we being mindful of, are they subjective, objective? Like, are they actually corporate? Are they individual? I mean, I'd love for you to speak into that. Like, what is stuff that you're seeing where there's maybe overemphasis on certain things, underemphasis on others, and how can we just be better stewards of the songs that we actually put before our people?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating one to me. Well, the way that I've always taught like song writing and song kind of selecting for a worship set, I've always talked about like we need them to be three things, and it's really hard to find songs that are all three. So it's a Venn diagram where you've got artistically beautiful. That's one thing. That's what I was mentioning a second ago. Our culture, even people who aren't into music, are they have been acclimated to artistic beauty being the standard. Now, there's some subjectivity to that. There's also some objectivity. Okay, so we don't have to get into all of that. We can if you want. But artistic beauty, there is a level of mastery things need to be at. Okay, that needs to be there. If we're doing this for congregational engagement, I think there also needs to be congregational accessibility. So those two things can be in tension right there. A beautiful melody that rates 10 on artistic beauty it might cover 2 octaves. So that brings it pretty low on congregational accessibility, right? So if it's a song for everyone to engage in, there's a tension already of artistic beauty and congregational accessibility. That's not that hard to resolve, I don't think, but there is some tension. The last Venn diagram is artistically beautiful, congregationally accessible, and then theologically insightful. The reason I'm saying insightful instead of, let's say, like true, is because I think that we're kind of worn out with all the basic platitudes. Like for me to get up and do a new song. Here's my new song. It's called "God is Good, God is Holy, God loves us, glory, glory." Like, okay, all of those are true. None of those provoke anything new in the way you think. And so it has to have insight. There's something fresh. This instigates something. It disturbs something. It awakens something. It challenges something. The lyric has to actually provoke something. And so you can see if you put all three of those on a Venn diagram, then what you might want to do, and I've had people who I've coached do this, take the last years repertoire. Planning Center will give it all to you.
Yeah.
And maybe you could even chuck out all the songs you only did once or twice. Just look at the ones you did 3 or more times. Where would you put them? Are they right at the center where they're all three of those? Are they out on an edge? Are they in between two but missing one? This often happens. Like it's really hard to write or even like find many songs that are all three of those things. But I have people who have a massive whiteboard on their wall in their office with last year's audit, and they draw those three circles. And what I suggest is like songs that are all three of those, you need to emphasize those songs.
Yeah.
Songs that are just two of those, exercise those in moderation. Songs that are just one of those, I suggest you excise those. They're not very helpful, you know? And so a song that I've picked on a lot is I Raise a Hallelujah. I don't even know who wrote that song. I don't care. I just think it's a terrible song on all three of those fronts. Hot take coming in. Okay. I don't think there's nothing about insightful. There's actually nothing really about God. The only line about God is the King is alive. Hardly insightful. Congregationally accessible. It's so inaccessible. You have to have a guy sing one part and a girl sing another. So that's
Yeah, in terms of the octave range. Yeah.
Yeah. And then artistically beautiful, to me, there's nothing really beautiful about it. It's a cliche, and it's not only is it kind of a cliche, it's the most presumptuous worship song I've heard probably in 20 years about how awesome I am and what my worship's gonna do. And no one's ever praised God like I'm about to praise God. I'm like, really, are we really so? And so I think it can be helpful to put some frameworks around what we're doing and not to do an autopsy every time you write a song or every time you design a worship set, but every now and then hit pause, reflect, look back, and go, what? I don't think probably many churches are just like way off on this or like really egregiously wrong on it. I think though what can happen is we can drift, and we'll probably drift towards the pastor or the worship pastor's preferences.
Yep.
And a big conviction that I have is I don't want someone's preferences determining our culture. I would love for scripture and vision and conviction actually to be driving us towards where we're going. But chances are, just like the wheels in your car eventually just get out of alignment, we can over time get a little bit out of alignment with where we want to go. And so it's just helpful to have a tool to be able to go, oh, okay, I think that we probably in the next quarter could bump up the artistic beauty. So I've been coaching a worship leader, and that's been his notice as he's done an audit. He's like, we're pretty good at congregational accessibility. They sing pretty good, theologically insightful. Like our stuff is thought-provoking and true and rich lyrically. I think that we're just not very creative. And it's not very artistically, like I've actually heard some comments around like, can we add some more instruments sometime? I think we're in a bit of an artistic rut. And so it was helpful for him in coaching with him, for him to just be able to say, that's what we need to kind of emphasize. So then we do some coaching around, so how might you do that? Maybe it's, let's find some songs that are more artistically interesting. Another thing that kind of came to mind for him was there's a guy on his team who's really musical, who's written some songs that are really good and different, they're kind of odd. And I was like, oh, maybe there's someone on your team that can help fill this hole for you. You might not have to be the most artistically driven person on your team. Be a smart enough leader to be able to recognize that you're not and to find someone who can be. Because maybe this is an Andy Stanley line or something, but like what we don't want is cultures that reflect our strengths and our weaknesses. We want cultures that reflect our strengths and not our weaknesses. And so to be a good leader is to recognize where you're strong, recognize where you're weak, and make sure that you put someone who's strong in the places where you're weak. So the same thing would go with these preferences and, leanings. I would say, man, get a vision for what you want your worship culture to be.
Yeah.
And then figure out where you actually are and then close the gap. Like, what do you need to do? Are there songs that need to subtract? Songs that need to add? Is it more than songs? Right. And so that's not to just go like a runaway train here, but that's kind of how I usually start thinking about it. The second layer yeah, if you want, like you mentioned, was objectivity and subjectivity, where I don't have I don't have like empirical research on this, but I do have a hunch that a lot of the songs that have lasted have leaned towards objectivity. God is this, God has done that, the cross is this. It's just like it's not like subjective to my experience. Um, a lot of the more recent songs and songs that come and go are lean towards subjectivity, which is the "I love you, Lords."
Mm.
Like, well, is that true or not? Depends on who's singing it, I guess, and maybe the day. Like subjectivity, is that true? It depends. And so it was interesting. Another one of the guys that I've coached went through every line in the book of Psalms
Mm.
and tried to know, is this objective or subjective?
Mm.
And that was really interesting. Is this God-centered or man-centered? He went through every line and broke stuff down. And I mean, I won't. I don't even remember the results of everything, but I do remember the Psalms tend a little bit more toward. There's also kind of some third space. It's like God stuff, man stuff. Then there's some weird stuff like nature or the Leviathan or whatever. So we accounted for that too. It leans toward more God-centric, objective stuff. Obviously, we need subjective. We need personal. We need stuff we can relate to. We need oh gosh, my brain is slowing down. We need the interpersonal and intimate. We need all of it.
Mm.
Again, the problem isn't that we're 90% 10. It's that if for 6 or 7 years you keep leaning towards this one thing, I think that the way you actually would probably see a richer culture would be moving away from your preferences back to a centered or more biblical, comprehensively aware vision for your
Yeah.
worship culture. So sorry, that's a
No,
word
good.
salad.
Yeah, I love it. No, I mean, because one thing I'm noticing is just there's a lot of like, it seems like we're losing a lot of even the we language in our worship songs. So like almost everything seems like it's like individualistic expression nowadays, where it's like I'm doing this, and I don't know what you said about I raise a hallelujah, like come watch me do this. I've heard you say in some other trainings, like you've talked about the songs used to be, greater you Lord, then it became like, okay, well, great is God, and then now it's like, well, come watch me tell you like how great is God. It's kind of that
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just interesting, that tension of like, man, it seems like we're even shifting away from like the corporate expression, becoming super individualistic, and then kind of losing some of that. Like there is something special when we gather as the people of God collectively and actually say like, even, hey, we're coming to do this, or like collectively, that collective expression versus just like an individual personalized expression, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, we are such a lot of white Americans would probably lean into that individualism. I don't know that's true for all Americans.
Yeah.
But when most of the worship songs that are most popular are written by white Americans, especially men, um, that I'm not surprised that that's
Mhm.
kind of where most of the lyrics, again, not all, but a lot of lyrics. And it's kind of funny because like I know that there will be great examples of counterpoint. It's just that I don't know what they are.
Mm.
Like they're not popular. So like because a lot of worship leaders I don't think they don't have the time to go scour
Yeah.
Spotify to find great songs that hit all three of those circles. And they might not be in a network of other worship leaders where they can lean on someone else's, because it's not just preference, there's also purview. Preference is what you like, purview is what you're even aware of. There's a lot of stuff happening that's outside of any of our purview. And there's more and more stuff happening outside of our purview every day.
Yeah.
But I can't keep up with all the albums anymore.
Yeah.
I used to be able to. Like
Yeah.
I used to get everything that group would put out or that label would release. I just trusted them. Who can you do that with anymore? There's too much stuff. And so to be able to go find it all, it's too exhausting. So a lot of worship, and I've done this too. A lot of worship leaders, they're going to leave for something or for church. They'll just be like, what are the top 50 songs? I'll just look at those.
Mm.
I don't need to see 500 options. Let me just look at the top 20.
Yeah.
That's what most people are going to know, and that's fine, and nothing wrong with that, except it creates a reinforcing cycle
Yeah.
of of uh, uh, homogeny,
Mm,
where things are just becoming more and more similar. And I mean, Stuart Townend told me years ago, we have more songs than ever, but we're singing about fewer things.
yeah.
I
Wow.
think he's dead on. Like, and it's really interesting if you go to, say, like a live album recording and you listen to 12 or 13 songs in a row.
Mm,
So that's a different kind of experience than a church service where there's two songs and
yeah.
then this thing and then a song and a thing and then a message and then two songs. When you listen to 12 or 13 songs in a row, you really start to see lyrically, if each song is a circle on a diagram and all the commonality gets overlapped and all the distinction is disparate, you really see how much we're all saying the same things in so many of these songs.
Man.
What songs are saying something different in the top? I'm not an analyst. I'm not really even much of a practitioner these days, but as I reflect back, if you look at the thematic distinctions in those top 20, 30, 50 songs versus the thematic, not only commonality, but almost like identical similarity,
Yeah.
it's really getting, the common denominator is getting pretty low.
Mm,
And that's sad because who was it? The I can't remember. One of the authors I read years ago talked about, like, as as Christians who believe God created the world, we should be absolutely interested in the world. Oh, it was Hans Rookmacher, the Dutch guy. And he talked about how Christians lost our influence in the world because we
mm.
lost our interest in it.
Wow,
But the
man. Yeah.
Bible is really interested in the world. Like, that's what I love about the Psalms. I love that it talks about Leviathan. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
It talks
Yeah.
about creatures in the deep and sunsets and mountains and rivers and streams and dew on the mountains. And it's like, wow, it's it's really interested in reality.
Mm,
And it seems these days we're really interested in piety.
mm.
We're really interested in ardent earnestness. Like, earnest would probably be the word I'd use to just if there were a word to describe worship in the last 10 years, earnest. Just, "Ah, I really love you so much, God, I have so much faith, and it's like, bro, if you have to lead worship with
Mm.
veins coming out of your neck, you might want to, like, relax a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just because, like, it's not where most people are at. It's not tenable to
Yeah.
be. Um, I'm more interested in kissing my wife
Yeah.
after 24 years of marriage now. That's different than when we were just dating and
Yeah.
engaged. And so much of, I feel like, the ardency, I don't know if that's a word. I might have made that up. That's funny if I did. So much of the earnest intensity
Mm,
is not tenable long term.
yeah.
But what's really beautiful is what intimacy does look like after a couple decades.
Mm,
It's different.
yeah.
To me, it's deeper. It's actually better.
Yeah.
We know what we're doing a lot more now.
Yeah, man.
Um, and so just dialing down the intensity and dialing up the sincerity and intentionality, I'm all for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I love being led in worship by a thoughtful worship pastor. I love
Mm,
it.
yeah.
I dread being led in a pep rally on Sunday
Yeah.
morning. I dread it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm alone in that.
Mm, man. Yeah. What would you, I mean, just to follow up on that, like, what would you say is the biggest thing? I mean, we've talked through some of it, but if there's maybe, you know, top two things of like, man, how worship leaders can be more thoughtful versus just the hype guys and gals, again, that are kind of like leading the charge in a pep rally, like, what would those things be of like, man, if you could just work at these things, like that's going to go a long way in actually shepherding people.
Mm, I mean, just from where I'm sitting right now, I would love to get a sense from a worship leader that they are any of these things, personable. So they're honest about. That's the thing. Like if 3 of the 4 songs that you pick are about how white hot your love for God is, and how you get everything you pray for and every miracle is yours, like, okay, and there's never an admission of frailty or where you're struggling or where you're not killing it. That's a big one. Like actual personal vulnerability. Um, Dude, poetry is another way in. Just say it in a beautiful way. Like, can you refine what you're saying so that it can be heard in a day and age where there's a lot of noise? Like, it's the same way as like if you want to write a lyric that's gonna grab anyone, you're gonna have to work because all the easy stuff's been taken now. Um, to do a call to worship and have it kind of be the same thing every week, or the same thing as the church down the road,
Yeah.
as opposed to, man, dial up the beauty of this thing a little bit. So personal, poetic, prophetic, obviously. Like if someone really, I love when a worship leader has prayed and gotten what they sense is a word from God beforehand. I might not know whether or not that's real all the time, but I would rather be led in someone trying to hear from God and say what they think he's saying than someone who's up there just doing what they do on autopilot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Personal, uh, poetic, prophetic. And lastly, I'd probably say just pastoral, where this isn't like vulnerability with what's going on in you, it's sensibility to what's going on in people.
Yeah.
And if a lot of people in the room are in this economy, there's a lot of people who are struggling. We got consumer debt at the highest ever. There's a lot of people who are under financial pressure. So just being able to cognizantly lead and I think compassionately communicate that you get it.
Yeah.
It's okay. Instead of just boldly declaring, I've never seen the righteous forsaken, and no sparrow falls, from the sky without God. No. And there's ways to boldly say these things that can actually kind of weaponize them against people who are hurting.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that if a leader is aware of that stuff, they can even use really bad songs and spin them to become really powerful.
Yeah.
So you're never gonna let me down. Give me strength. Are you joking me? But all right, if you gotta sing that song, what if a worship leader afterwards said, but sometimes it feels like he's let us down?
Yeah.
All right. All of a sudden now I'm interested because if we're just gonna sing you're never gonna let me down, or you've never let me down. That's a hop, skip, and a jump. Now it's not just there's a way to justify this eschatologically. Now it's I've never been let down by God once. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you. You have managed to how did you exonerate yourself from the human condition? Wow. Like I just don't believe it. But maybe there's like, okay, maybe you feel that way, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of people have felt let down by God. And maybe one day they won't be. And maybe one day they'll look back and go, no, it was great. But you still felt what you felt. And to dignify that people are where they are and not assume that they are where they need to be. You don't get to do that. I think we have to dignify the desert that a lot of people are in. We have to start with where people are. And I think we can, if we minister to people where they are through vulnerability and frailty and compassion.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way they're ever actually going to get anywhere
Yeah.
else.
Oh, man. Yep. Yeah,
I
that's so good.
think.
No. Yeah, I mean, just even that that idea of like, again, not losing touch with people's real lives and what's really going on. I mean, I think like, I know
Mhm.
something that was instilled through worship school even was just that idea of like, man, get out of the green room and like go in the lobby or go in between, the pews or the chairs or whatever, and just like talk to people, find out what's going on, because that's going to help us actually shepherd the people better rather than just like, hey, these are the songs I like. I mean, back to the preferences, like you mentioned earlier. And so I'm going to
Mhm.
subject you to the songs that I like instead of like, what do these people actually need? What is God speaking to our
Yeah.
church and our body? And so, yeah, so good. So good.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The one of the last songs that I wrote with Aaron Williams was a song
Mm,
called Abide, and
yeah. Oh,
apparently that a lot of people have recorded it and they're singing it. And when I think back on all the songs that I wrote over the 20 years, the ones that people sing the most
mm,
all have a common theme. So Sovereign Over Us was like this, Psalm 62 was like this.
mm,
They're all really pretty honest about how hard things can be
mm,
and how weak we are and how needy. And those lyrics, I think it's just interesting that the only songs, I mean, a lot of other like small places have grabbed onto different songs that I've written, but
mm,
as far as like globally or whatever, like when I get these reports, I think it's interesting that those are the three that a lot of people are singing, and they all address the human condition a little bit of
mm,
dependence and reliance and fragility, man.
mm.
And they stand out because, again, I haven't paid attention to the charts in a very long time, but my hunch is a lot of the songs very high on those charts do not do that. And they actually are super
Mm,
positivistic, triumphalistic almost, about
yeah.
the mountain's going to be cast, and I'm going to get the breakthrough, and we are the generation that's probably going to do it. And
Mm,
I'm like, I don't
yeah.
know. Um, I, I just wonder what the shelf life is going to be
Yeah.
on that sentimentality.
Mm, man. And it seems like you mentioned in one of your answers earlier, you mentioned the word worship culture, right? Which it seems like that's making me just jump to that real quick, because I think there's a lot of people that are being like discipled by what worship is when they look to like YouTube and we see like the elevations, the Bethels, the Maverick cities. I mean, again, amazing expressions. I don't want this to come across as like I'm speaking down to those movements, right? But just I get to now work with a lot of younger people that even like down to middle schoolers, and like it's just very apparent with them. Like they're like, man, like I saw the latest Elevation or Bethel video. It's like, man, that is such an amazing, and they'll even use the word worship. That's such an amazing worship culture. How do we do that?
Mhm,
And so I'm just kind of like, when I hear
mhm,
that, it scares me a little bit, because I'm just like, man, like, okay, how do we help people not just look to another context, and then even myself, like, how do I not look to another context and go like, wish we had that, and
mhm.
miss what God is doing in the very local context that
Yeah.
we get to be a part of. So I don't know if you have any
Mhm.
thoughts just speaking into that, like what are the dangers and what can we do to avoid that kind of like looking across the pasture, if you will.
Gosh, yeah. Do I have any thoughts on that? I would love to see more churches writing songs that
Mm,
are celebrating what God's doing in their cities. Kind of more particularity and a little less universality.
mm,
I think that it's very easy to just grab onto what other people are doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But over and over and over in the Psalms, especially, it's like sing to the Lord a new song. I
mm,
think that there's something about bringing your perspective, your story, your journey. Let's celebrate this too. Um, but that's hard to do, man, because what those places that have created so many songs that have gone all around the world, what they did before any of that happened was they began singing their story
yeah.
and attracting more people who knew how to do that. And then
Mm,
eventually it just like erupts like a volcano, but it had been underground for probably a
mm,
very long time, right? Um, And often in those places, there's a lot of stuff going on behind closed doors that doesn't look very keen to me. And I'm not assuming that's the case with any of the places that you've mentioned, but usually we find out about it after the fact,
Mm,
about how differently the warehouse was than the window. And I'm more interested these days in the warehouse than the window.
yeah.
Um, I yeah, I would have a hard time being excited about singing someone's song that I wasn't really sure what was going on
Yeah.
behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to be the kind of leader that the closer you get to me, the more you respect me, not the less.
Yeah, man.
And
Mm,
I've always wanted to be connected to ministries where what we were doing behind closed doors was as kingdomy as what we were doing on stages,
yeah.
right? Like I don't want to present one thing in front of an audience and then go have a vituperative and opportunistic and greedy back office.
Yeah.
I I'm not built for incongruence like
Yeah.
that. And so I don't think I answered your question very well, except just to say, like, man, I would just tap into, you don't have to be a great songwriter
Mm,
to write one little chorus thanking God for the unique things that he's done in your place. It wouldn't hurt if you worked on some of the skills of songwriting, but it's not necessary.
yeah.
It it becomes more important if you're trying to put out your songs and have a bunch of other churches sing them.
Yeah.
It becomes important if you're singing five of your church's original songs in a row.
Yeah.
Now the diet, if the diet is all original, then
Mm,
that repertoire of songs that you've written better be pretty well balanced nutrients, you know?
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess I would say, like, a lot of streams or places, what they feed the world has particular
Mm,
vitamins and minerals,
yeah.
but no one place has all of them. And so it's
Yeah.
helpful to get everything that we need and not become kind of anemic.
Yeah, man. That's good.
We need some iron, we don't
Yeah.
just need whatever protein.
Yeah.
We need some sodium.
Yeah. When I think about the visual,
Now I'm just all salty.
the visual that's coming to my head right now is, you get the food pyramids that talk about the balanced diet. I'm like, we should have a healthy worship pyramid. I would love to see what that looks like. I love it, man. Well,
That's funny.
yeah, Aaron, well, I want to respect your time, man. We'll kind of wind down here, but maybe just a few questions just as we wrap up. I mean, obviously, I want to ask you in a moment how people can connect with you. I know you're doing coaching and that's available, so I want to
Yeah.
let people know about that. We'd love to close out just praying for you and Megan, just the next season you guys are in. But
Thank you, man.
one quick question, just because I personally love books and just reading. And it's being like, it's in a sense, it's a way to be mentored by people, even if you don't have that relationship and connection with them. But I'm just noticing it seems like it's becoming less and less of a thing, especially in the rise of YouTube and podcasts. It's almost easier to flip that on. But I'd love you to just give, like, man, worship leaders, like, if they could read one book, even in the next 6 months, like, what would that be? Or maybe it's two or three. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to distill it down, but what would you recommend?
Okay, look at this.
Hey,
Beyond High Performance.
awesome.
That's the book I would encourage people to read. This is written by the CEO and the some of the senior partners of the firm that I'm a part of, the coaching firm. And I love a lot of the tools in that book. They help you step up in ownership, what's going on in your life. They help you get more intentional about the team that you're putting around you. And they give tools that will really release potential
Mm,
in people. And these are some of the kind of core convictions of the firm, which I ascribe to wholeheartedly. But I mean, the main idea of Beyond High Performance is, if you drew a pyramid, to quote where we were, and you thought about performers in a team or in an organization or in a business or in church, you got lowest tier, these people try not to get fired. Middle tiers are just doing a good job. And then the very top are the top performers, the high performers. They're trying to figure out how to win.
mm,
And a lot of churches would you could put on those, like, what are the churches in town? Are we like lowest? Are we mid? Are we top performer, high performer, whatever?
yeah.
And the book's kind of saying, what's above high performance? And they call it meta performance, like above that performance. And if the question that low performers ask is how do I not get fired, and the question that high performers ask is how do I win, the question that meta performers ask is what are we capable of?
Oh man.
What's possible? And that's most of the coaching that I do with people is I don't really care. Okay, so you won a Grammy. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I have multiple friends who won Grammys.
Yeah.
They did it in their 20s. What are they going to do the next 70 years? Sit
Yeah.
back? No, like they know there's more. And so helping people uncover and then enter into what's next and what else, because we have a few fundamental tenets, right? Like everyone's capable of more than they think, everyone's team is capable of exponentially more than they think,
Mhm.
and everyone's gonna get in their own way without some help.
Mhm.
um, these tools in that book will help you identify how much more you're capable of than you've thought. And hopefully people through some of these tools, although, not the same as walking it out in a process of
Mhm.
coaching, but the book itself can get you a lot of helpful tools
Mhm.
where hopefully you can start to identify where you're going to get in your own way
Yeah.
as well. And for me, dude, it correlates so well with Ephesians 3 about the God who is able to do far
Man.
more abundantly beyond all
Mhm.
we've asked or imagined. Like what Paul's describing is we are capable of so much more than we
Mhm.
think. And God has prescribed so much more than we have owned.
Mhm.
It's like, dude, the promised land, like the geography of what God laid out versus the occupancy under their height as an empire under Solomon. Do you know what percentage of it they actually occupied?
Mhm. Yeah.
10%
Dang.
under Solomon. 10% of what God laid out for them, they actually stepped into.
Mhm.
And to me, it's just paradigmatic of so many of our lives where who knows why we don't step in. Maybe it's fear, like Israel in the desert, they're afraid of the giants. Maybe it's no faith. Often it's stuff between our ears. It's limiting beliefs. It's mindsets. It's habits. A lot of people they're unaware that there's a better way to do this.
Mhm.
Like you can actually get a vision for who you want to be, figure out the gap between where you are in that vision, get some accountability in your life, make some big commitments, keep them, and become that person. There's a better way than
Mhm.
we'll just see what happens,
Mhm.
But so many people are on autopilot, they're on
Yeah.
cruise control. And a lot of what I'm doing in coaching, what this book will do, is shift you from just like, I guess I'll take what I get, to no,
Mhm.
I want to chase what I want.
Mhm.
Like how many people do you want to impact? How many 3 years from now? Like if I were coaching you, I'd be like, 3 years from now, Jeremy, how many leaders do you want to have trained and released into churches? Like let's get a big vision for that. And then as big as we can imagine it, then let's go,
Yeah.
what if that's just 10%?
Man.
And then, okay, let's 10x it. Now, who do I need to become to lead that?
Yeah.
And what would that leader do? Because that's the kind of stuff
Yeah.
I'm going to start doing today.
Yep. Man. That is awesome. I love it.
It's great. It's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yep. Well, man, how do people, if they do want to connect with you in that or connect with the firm you're working with, like where can they go? How do we, people want to follow up with you? Like what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, any of the socials are kind of easy to find. AaronKeys.com. There's a whole coaching. AaronKeys.com/coaching is
Sweet.
where I've put some of the stuff about the kind of stuff I normally coach with. They could definitely reach out to Novus Global, the firm. They could set up a call with me or with any of
Yeah.
those coaches. I mean, I haven't met one that I wasn't impressed with yet.
Mhm.
And so pretty easy to get in touch with us, and any of us would probably love to set up an exploratory call.
Yeah.
Let's see what's in your heart. Let's see what's in your vision. Let's
Yeah.
see if you can get there on your own without a coach. Because if you can, I guarantee it's too small.
Yeah. Dang. Yep. That's that reminder. Like we all need people that are going to gonna push us and just go like, hey, you've got more in you than you actually see in yourself. I mean, I know, again, like I know for me that was the case even going through worship school, and that wasn't even a one-on-one basis. It was, one on
Yeah.
group or one in
Yeah.
community. But yeah, just the power of just somebody actually calling out things that maybe we don't even know are in there. So, man, I love what you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks,
Awesome.
bro. Well, I'm really happy to reconnect with you. I love to see what you're going after. Dude, I wish you the best in it. And if there are ways that we can support it or cheer you on, we
Mm,
will.
and thanks, Aaron. Yeah. Well, I'd love to close out. Just how can I pray for you and Megan, the season you guys are going into? Anything that come to mind? And love to close out just praying for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our kids all under our roof again, which is wild.
Awesome.
And so we are just so excited about this summer with our family.
Mm,
Once your kids move out, the rest of their lives, on average, you get 1 year with them
yeah.
total. So
Yep.
you get 19 years with your kids, 18, and then they move away. The rest of their life is a year
Yeah.
combined.
Man.
And so I feel like we get 3 months with two of our kids this summer. So the prayer would be
Yeah.
that I actually can keep enough focus to get my work done because I just want to play with my family.
That's
It's
awesome.
so freaking
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Man, that's
No, but I'm praying for probably six more clients.
okay.
I want six more clients. I'd love to help at least 20 people a year
Mm,
become wildly fruitful in their lives. And so I have room for that, and
yeah.
that's what I'm praying for.
That's awesome. Cool. And I'll link all those things you described, like the ways to get in touch with you. I'll link all that down in the show
Cool.
notes. So
That's great.
cool. Well, let me pray.
Awesome.
Let me pray for you.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, Lord, thanks for this time. I just pray the people listening again too. You would take the things that have been shared through this, and again, not just have it be a conversation that falls on deaf ears, Lord, but let it be something where it just activates action, even in our lives, activates faith, Lord, to actually take a step, and again to see you do those things that are beyond what we can even ask or imagine. And then God, just bless the Keys family, Lord, Aaron and Megan, God, again, that they would just be encouraged and know that the seasons past, Lord, were not in vain. Lord, again, that the instilling of value and those values of hospitality and just again how to shepherd people or not just lead songs, that they would see again that that's not in vain, and just bless them, Lord, for that work and that investment and that time, and that they would continue to see even time after time the impact of that legacy, that they would get to see even the stories and hear those stories of fruitful labor, Lord, in seasons past. And then again for this summer, God, just man, just make that time with family so rich and sweet. Help Aaron to focus, Lord, in his work, and then bring those extra clients, Lord. Bring the people that you have for him to work with, and Lord, we just bless the work of their hands. We lift it up in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Amen.